is the idea of like the caste system, that's not so much really what defines a Hindu. There's divisions in life that exist, but those divisions have been misused now by certain people and certain powers, the Brahmins, but that's not Hinduism, because Hinduism says you have to see everyone with equal division. Human, animal, everything has to be treated with respect. You have to treat, basically like, treat others as you want to be treated. That's really how Hinduism is brought. So that caste system is there. But actually within the Hare Krishna movement 500 years ago, Chaitanya, who founded that movement in West Bengal, he actually rejected it 500 years ago. And so our tradition kind of wants to reject it and said, hey, if you're born to be a priest, if that's your inclination, even if you're born in a lower caste, you should be able to do that. And if you're born as a priest, but you're not demonstrating the life of a priest, you should have no right to be a priest. So that's kind of a little bit some of the things that I address when I get in front of students. Thank you.
When we went to, or when we heard the Imam Talib speak to us the other day, he seems to be very open towards interfaith. But he was especially welcoming to, I guess, people of the Abrahamic religions. And he didn't really say anything about Muslim-Hindu relations, which I understand are a little bit strained in certain parts of the world. And so I was just hoping maybe you could comment on that.
I think this is such an important question, and just to sort of add like a tag on a little corollary to it, I've just noticed recently, in recent years, because Islamophobia is understandably one of the really pressing issues that people in the interfaith movement are trying to address. There's this tendency now to start talk about, we're all here under this Abrahamic umbrella, the umbrella of the Abrahamic traditions. And it's this very welcoming gesture to say, oh, well, we're not just Judeo-Christian anymore, now we're Abrahamic and Islam is included too. But then, that draws a new line that leaves out non-Abrahamic, mostly Asian traditions. So I wonder how does that kind of impact Hindu life and this?
So our organization has made a conscious effort. We force ourselves into the conversation. Because at the end of the day, in this city, I can say as well, we all look the same. I'm mistaken for a Muslim all the time, and Islamophobia is a real issue. Last year, there was a crime that happened in Woodhaven, Queens, where a man burned a bunch of flags in front of it was a Hindu home, but was saying things that were anti-Muslim, and so that therein was our opportunity to be the bridge and to speak out and to liaise and to communicate with the Muslim community to say we are with you, and this happened to a Hindu who was perceived as Muslim. So we're certainly open as we move to interfaith dialogue, but I do think that the reality is much of interfaith work thus far has really been from the Abrahamic faiths. You'll often see in many interfaith conversations that Hindus are missing in the conversation. And that's part of why we exist as well, to be the representatives for Hindus in these spaces. So I think it goes both ways, right? There may be a resistance to having Hindus be part of the conversation. I'm not sure, I can't speak to that side, but I will say that on our end, we need to make a conscious effort to be part of those conversations, and we are doing that.
Approaching it again from a philosophical perspective, within the Hindu tradition as a whole, it's recognized that, they're, as I mentioned earlier, there's one God that everyone is worshiping, and no one person should be prohibited from worshiping. As long as they're not hurting other people as a result of their worship or interpreting their texts in a way that say that it's okay to hurt others. Everyone should be respected in their method of worship and should be supported in that way. That's kind of how we see it. And I remember there's one of our teachers from a couple hundred years ago, his name was Aminta, he himself said, "Oh, it's so wonderful to see God being worshipped, my God being worshipped, and another house of worship." And he was referring, of course, to a church that he had visited, saying, "It's so wonderful to see my God being worshipped in a slightly different way." So it should be very broad. It's supposed to be very broad and accepting.
Same philosophy, like we are all one human race, and in my growing up, we have so many friends who are coming from a Muslim background, and this whole dispute between two religions actually instigated more when India became independent, when Britishers left and divided India and Pakistan to have the Muslim land and the Hindu land, and it split the families. And so due to that political reason, the dispute has continued, but in the community, we have so many Muslim friends, we exchange dinner, we go into the mosque, pray, believe, they come to the temple, so that dialogue is still going on, but just at certain political setup, that is how it is created the differences. Where that will end, we don't know, but we have to continuously make an effort. What is said before, that we have to make that change within ourselves consciously, and peace together, respect each other. Going to the dargah, going to the masjid, going to those families, it is just, they are also upset what is happening right now because of the unsettled dispute, and it is a really big question mark. But that's a good question we have asked, where we are, but as an individual from the community, yes, we have so many friends, and we don't see any difference.
Just as kind of a follow-up on this, it just struck me, thinking back through your presentations, that all three of you in different ways are doing work where you're sort of drawing on Hindu traditions in a way that is open to or of service to, the whole city. So like in the RT lamp ceremony, you're doing recreating a version of a very traditional Hindu ritual, but inviting like everyone in New York to come down to Brooklyn Bridge Park. What is it, August 6th, 4 o'clock, see you all there. And there's like, it's not just Hindus that are coming to do that, it's everyone. And Pandit as well, like vegetarian cooking classes for any Columbia student to come. I'm sure it was not just Hindus there.
Mostly it wasn't.
Mostly it wasn't. Okay.
Hindu, agnostic, atheist, everything else.
And so like the core of sadhana's work is like we have these, ethics within the Hindu tradition that require us to serve everyone, right? So it seems like there's something very expansive and interfaith that's like at the core of all of that. So like Aeilushi, what have you heard when non-Hindus come to the RT ceremony at Brooklyn Bridge Park and they get to participate in this kind of piece, this element of Hindu ritual life? Like, what do you feel that are they getting something from that that's specifically Hindu?
Many approach me and thank me for bringing this event to Brooklyn Bridge Park. And it's like, this is so accessible, and when you hear the word accessible, literally you mean and she break it down for me, is like accessible to all communities, not just for Hindus or not just for the Indians, but this is so accessible for everybody, and you have allowed this moment to be connect with themselves, however they want to connect the moment. You have not given any specific, like this should be performed that way, but you have given that moment for themselves to connect within their soul to the nature art. So that's like that word accessible. And I was very pleased that I'm allowing myself to perform this ceremony. If I would have not allowed the 500 people last year to replace the lamp, but there were 700 of them. So like helping the 700 coming to that river was very powerful. and at the same time breaking the stereotypical image of the Hudson River, East River, and the history you all are aware of it, like floating bodies, and now I'm getting that with me, many are going into that river, and Park is really doing a good job in cleaning that river and making an effort, and it's very clean, and I'm really proud of that river. So we are collectively working together. So yeah, it's inaccessible. And yesterday I was reading one of the testimonies, like coming to this ceremony, learning this tradition is very powerful. So I don't know who has written that, but like reading that moment was very powerful. So there are many moments, and even like Indian who had been to America for last 33 years, they came here when they were in 20s. They have come to me and said, I'm Indian, I'm coming from so-and-so place, never been to Ganges, never performed this type of ceremony. I have heard about this ceremony, but thank you for bringing this ceremony here, and now I feel I have fulfilled my ceremony and placed my lamp into Ganges through East River. So it's like a full circle, like hearing those stories, even not for Indians, but from non-Indians. It's like everybody is telling their moment, and it's so, I have like 600 quotes with me, but I cannot go for each and every one. But it's so meaningful. It's a very meaningful moment.
Can I ask a follow-up? It's just, I mean, the accessibility is wonderful, the openness is wonderful, the sort of sense of feeling like it's one, but where's the line, maybe it's different for you, or you know, of disrespect, of cheapening, of distinction, of cultural appropriation? Can you help us understand that for you?
The last question, could you repeat?
Like, where would the line be of being disrespectful, or of cheapening a tradition, or culturally appropriating? The accessibility is wonderful, but where would it be?
Like if non-Hindus or anyone sort of adopt the arti ceremony, and you described it as so wonderful that everyone finds their own meaning in it and does their own thing with it, but is there any line where it's sort of no longer a Hindu tradition, or like disrespectful to the tradition?
I would take that moment not disrespectful when you do something you think it's incorrect. That is where you don't know, and that is how you have performed that moment. So as a child, you have done so many incorrect moments, and you have disrespect going into the temple with shoes, and like, oh, right, like you cannot go to the temple wearing your shoes. You have to remove your shoes outside, and like you don't know such moments, and like I take it that way. That person has done something. It's because the person is not aware of what's the right or what's wrong, but like there is a sincerity behind that, and that is most is counted. And then we can build a conversation and tell the purpose behind it. But for me, disrespectful, it's a moment of connecting together and exchanging the conversation.
I also think this question is related to yoga too, because yoga is so culturally appropriated, right? And there are different advocates on both sides who are like, well, yoga is becoming so not Hindu, and we need to take back yoga. And they're just, I personally, I feel like it's to me a beautiful thing when some of what my spirituality is shared with the world, and so I see it that way. Now, I would find it disrespectful. There was, I think, a company that was putting images of gods on socks. And to me, that would be a sign of disrespect, because if someone's walking on the deities, that hurts me. I think it's very tricky, and with Hinduism, it's very tricky because Hinduism often comes off as like super trendy, and I don't think there's a good way to answer the question, because it's really different. I mean, it is what people need to do.
So I think there's a really fine line in the arts, you know. I mean, so if you're singing or dancing prayers, what is the? I mean, it's the same question really. When people appropriate those art forms and use them for non-religious purposes, is that a line? I saw that you were teaching an Indian dance, and I mean, how do you make that connection between your spiritual practice as a dancer and somebody that just wants to dance? I guess that's what I'm trying to.
It comes with years of practice, and so yes, there will be a two different approach, but we need as a dance teacher, I would inform the student who is not coming with that background. The purpose to perform this type of dance is this, but I will not force if that student does not have that background, because that comes with not many years of practice and being in that moment. So it's just for 6 months you come and you will be trained. Then it will have a different outcome rather than the years of a journey being in that moment. Does it make sense?
Can I just add to that also? When you bring something east to a very foreign culture, that's inevitable. It's just going to happen. You take, something from here to India, it's going to get utilized in all different ways. So I think we just have to be, as Hindus, ready for that. We have to be able to accept that that's just what's going to happen. There's no way around it. And I think we can't get all bent out of shape. Yeah, I'm aware of this. We can't really take back here, really take back the wife. It's not. You own it. If somebody wants to do it for just to look good, for summer, okay, fine. Somehow you do it, you feel healthier. Maybe you go a little deeper with it yourself. Fine. If not, just want to look healthy. That's your right. What can you do about that? I mean, we kind of have to accept that that's just going to be part of life. You bring something over to the West, it's going to get used in a way that you didn't expect. Just to be ready that that's going to happen, and I think you just have to be okay with it. We got so many people that come to our temple for the evening kirtan just to chant, and they're never going to become Hare Krishna devotees. They're coming there for the great food, and they're coming for the nice chanting, and get yoga classes, and that's it. And then who knows? Maybe after they do the chanting there, they go to the nightclub 2 doors down. Who knows? But I'm like, well, at least they got some of the chanting in there. So I think that's kind of how I approach it. It is, what do you do in your personal life? But yeah, the line for me also would be a little bit disturbing, but I have heard also putting the images of gods on socks and things like that. You wouldn't want me walking on a picture of your mother or something like that. I found that would be kind of offensive. So that would be a little bit offensive for sure. I think that's probably understandable for most people. But other than that, I think you kind of have to be ready for that cultural adaptation that's going to take place when you bring something foreign to another.
Yeah, I like how you kind of parallel that to, when things from quote-unquote Western societies are kind of exported through colonialism or in other ways, to India. The missionaries that brought Jesus to India weren't expecting Indians to kind of reimagine him in some connection to Krishna or as an avatar of Vishnu or whatever. Exactly. Or it sort of backfired if you imagine that the kind of purity of the original would always be maintained wherever else it goes. But if you think of all these things as part of these global conversations, then it's great. Again, in my personal humble opinion, when people kind of readapt things. Maybe not comfortable in socks.
Yeah, I do agree with, I think the panel agrees on that, with the fashion. Certain images when I see, yes, it really, in that area, yes, it really bothers me, like t-shirts and certain things. So, in those moments, yes, there's a disrespect moment, but...
Why the fashion? Is it because it's more kind of seems more trivial, or more? Why does that cross a line for you?
Because it has its own space, and because we don't want our gods to get angry on us, and the outcomes will be different and negative, and that line of conversation will develop because and many times it has if you put it this way and that way, the outcome will be negative. So basically, their position is in a certain area, keep it that way, to not disturb people.
And even here, for me, a t-shirt would be okay because others are seeing the image as God. I would just think I wouldn't want to Krishna underwear or something like that. Again, you wouldn't want me wearing a picture of your mother on my underwear. That wouldn't be disrespectful. So I think that's common sense. But like a t-shirt or hat, I'm personally think that's kind of cool. If somebody walk around with a picture of underwear on there, someone's looking at, because we also understand by seeing the image of God, your mind becomes a little pure. So as long as it's not worn in a disrespectful part of the body, that kind of thing. I'm personally okay with that.
I was just wondering if, in our area, a lot of people are.
What's your area?
I teach world religion. I'm from Chicago. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with work with Vikram Gandhi, his documentary Kumara.
Yes.
I watched it, I previewed it, and I used it in class last year. It was almost transformational. For those of you who haven't watched it, it's fascinating. I was wondering in your opinion, because for me, I went through almost a paradigm shift in my own, where he went in with one and came out a totally different way. And my students just really latched on to him initially trying to prove it wrong, only to find out that he proved it. I would love your opinion.
What's the name of the film?
It's called Kumara. I found that people have opinions on both sides of whether or not it should be used in an academic setting as a critical film to approach lived Hinduism. To explain it just quickly for those who don't get it, Vikram Gandhi is a journalist who works, for many different organizations. Was he really? Oh, I didn't know that. Was he? I came across him with Vice. He worked for Vice News out of Brooklyn. But anyway, he goes in trying, again, with the cultural appropriation, he created himself as a false prophet, as a false guru. And the only message he taught was just trust yourself, follow yourself. And so people latched onto him, and at each turn he said, go home, don't listen to me, listen to yourself. And yet they kept gaining more followers with a message that his only thing was, I'll never lie to you. So he never lied to them. So every time he talks about, you only need yourself. And I just didn't know from Hindu perspective what you thought of it.
It's been a while since I saw it, and I remember, it's been many years, so I can't remember, there's something about it that I agree with it. Because I think one of his messages that comes across is basically, he almost comes across as that a lot of gurus are fake. Mm-hmm. And maybe almost like majority of them. I feel like he makes the idea of guru negative.
Yeah.
And I think I appreciate the idea that he's coming to that, and don't be fooled. Don't go into a relationship with a teacher in a blind way, just trusting them without having some foundation or understanding. So that I appreciate. Mm-hmm. But I didn't like the message that he said that basically like, you don't need a guru. Because that actually completely counters what Hinduism says. And I think even a lot of Buddhism that in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 4, verse 34, it says that you have to basically find a spiritual teacher who has achieved some level of self-realization and follow them and serve them. So without a teacher, how can we achieve perfection? Without a teacher, we didn't learn math. Without a teacher, we didn't learn science or English. Without a teacher, we can't learn yoga. Without a teacher, we can't learn to play basketball or tennis or swim. We've had a teacher for everything in life, every single thing. And so the fact that he denounces the idea of a guru, I'm like, oh, what a disservice he's doing. That he could have made it more neutral. Okay, just don't be fooled. Don't go into it blind. But there are really good gurus out there, and they may not look like, with a beard and a saffron. They may be wearing some cool pair of jeans or something, and they may really be deep within themselves. So don't choose a guru based on external. Choose a guru based on your intellect, based on the wisdom texts that are there in India. So I felt like that was a real disservice that he kind of did. But it was basically denouncing the whole idea of a guru, because I think he kind of went there.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a little inappropriate, because that means he actually doesn't have a deep understanding of Hinduism. Because if you study the text, they say that without a guru, you really can't achieve perfection. It's like you're trying to learn yoga without a teacher, I'll break my neck or something.
And we have a very old tradition, it's called Guru Shishya Parampara. And what you mentioned is that, but like right now we have school, but in the old tradition way, when students used to stay with teacher and study on oral tradition, and teacher will transform all the knowledge to the student. And after the study is over, they will perform all the duties for the teacher. That's the reward or that's the fee. So there is no monetary fee for that, but like just giving your devotion to your teacher. And that's the very old tradition of Guru Shishya Parampara. And yes, you need to make your research nowadays. who are the right teachers and not appropriate teacher. But that is what India is very proud about, that having that Guru Shishya Parampara to share the knowledge and to give the knowledge. And even today, that practice is still going on in India, where we have one teacher, one student, and knowledge is being transformed from one tradition to another, rather than book.
I will say I have mixed feelings about the movie. I felt uncomfortable at some points. I was laughing a lot for most of it. And I think that was the point. So that goes to say that I don't think it's an accurate depiction of what Hinduism is. I think that the goal of the movie was very clear to me. It was to poke fun at this idea of a guru. But then there was this other element, which is you can find realization within yourself. And whenever, I'm empowered as a non-Brahmin, as a woman, I would not be accepted to become a priest in my temple, but I perceive myself as, because I'm told we all have divine within us, right? That I can find myself through myself, and so I did. That part of the movie did resonate with me, and so I think that was a powerful moment. But that was my only takeaway that I thought might be somewhat parallel to what Hinduism actually is, which is that you yourself are divine. But I thought the movie was too much of a comedy to be the lived experience.
You know, one movie that I highly recommend, I've used it about 100 times to depict the idea of guru, and you're gonna laugh and have a good time with this, is The Matrix. And I really do. I use The Matrix, I use the character, whenever I go to a college, I'll show clips of that movie. I'll show how Morpheus instructs Neo, and I compare that to how Krishna is instructing Arjuna on the battlefield. So there's like lots of clips from the first part of The Matrix. The other two, unfortunately, I lost it. But there really is a phenomenal the dialogue, and so even Morpheus, people who can say, I can show you the door, but you have to walk through it. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth. You take the red pill or the blue pill, it's up to you. Like even at the end of the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, I've told you everything I want to tell you. Deliberate on it and then do what you wish to do. The Guru's never forced you. Say, hey, here's the door, you walk through it. You take the blue pill, you wake up and believe what you want. You take the red pill, I show you how to think the rabbit hole goes. I know the dialogue pretty well. But it's a really powerful, and it's also, I use that movie a lot because it's entertaining, and it's fun, and it's fairly accurate in the way a guru and disciple relationship is kind of depicted. And I also sometimes use the Karate Kid because we have the demos.
Well, the last thing, what about, have you seen The Legend of Bagger Vance?
I did, and I did not find much in there that I can use. I mean, I know it's a
Isn't his name Juna?
Yeah,
right,
it is.
isn't it?
On the externals, it is. I could not find. I really watched it with the intention because working with college students, I always try to find interesting ways to present Hinduism. In that one, I didn't find so many actual concepts that I could present.
Okay.
The other one I use is Contact with Jodie Foster, because that I use for the purpose of introducing how the age of the universe. Because Hinduism says that the universe is billions of years old, which is very similar to the modern scientific theory, and it's also very different from the Judeo-Christian tradition. And Contact talks about the theory of time being relative. Like when Jodie Foster goes into space and comes back, she should be much older or something like that. And that's what Einstein talks about, right? According to the speed of an object, and something item will age differently. So using the theory of relativity there and Contact and the multiverse and the age of the universe, I use Contact and I use other movies as well, just because I feel like for students, that's the way to kind of get it. That for me, that's the most powerful and fun and entertaining way to bring it together. So you can look at those. If you're looking for clips, I can share them with you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm so reluctant to cut this off because I love these kinds of creative connections and like these new ways into teaching about religion. And this is fantastic, but I have to, unfortunately, cut this off because we need to get on the bus really, really soon. Nathan, is the bus sitting out waiting for us? All right, so let's thank Pandit.